There was no knife that was found up in the bathroom area, right?
Yes.
So we know that you took it, right?
I don't remember having the knife at all afterward.
But there was no knife up there, right?
I haven't heard any testimony about that. So I
You would
agree.
acknowledge, ma'am, that Exhibit 193, that Mr. Alexander was stabbed. You would acknowledge that, right?
Yes.
And you would acknowledge that that stabbing was with the knife, right?
Yes.
And according to your version of events, you would acknowledge that that stabbing was after the shooting, according to you, right?
Yes, I don't remember.
I'm not asking you if you remember, ma'am. I'm asking if you acknowledge that it would be you that did it, correct?
Yes.
She walked into the interrogation room calm, composed, and willing to talk. Investigators did not rush her or challenge her account. They did not interrupt. They allowed her to speak freely, believing that time and consistency would reveal more than confrontation. What followed was not a sudden breakdown or a dramatic confession, but something slower and far more revealing. A story that did not collapse all at once, but gradually unraveled one sentence at a time. In June of 2008, Travis Alexander was found dead inside his home in Mesa, Arizona. The crime scene indicated a violent struggle, and investigators immediately began reconstructing the final days leading up to his death. Phone records were examined, digital evidence was reviewed, and people who had been in recent contact with him were identified. As detectives traced the timeline backward, one name appeared repeatedly: Jodi Arias. According to police records, Arias and Alexander had known each other for some time, and their relationship had been described as complicated. When investigators contacted her, she did not hesitate to cooperate. In fact, she appeared eager to talk. When she arrived for questioning, detectives observed that she appeared relaxed and confident. Her posture was open, her tone cooperative, and her responses detailed. She maintained eye contact and frequently volunteered information without being prompted. At this stage of the interview, nothing appeared outwardly unusual. According to interrogation specialists, individuals who believe they are in control of the narrative often speak freely, and investigators allowed this to continue. They listened carefully, not only to what was being said, but to how the story was structured and how details were presented. During the early portion of the interview, Arias spoke with confidence and consistency. Her explanations flowed easily, and she appeared comfortable answering questions. Investigators did not challenge her account. Instead, they allowed her to commit fully to her version of events, knowing that once a story is established, even small changes can become significant. As the interview continued, subtle inconsistencies began to emerge. Timelines shifted slightly, details were adjusted, and certain statements were later revised. Individually, these changes did not seem important, but consistency matters more than detail in an interrogation. Detectives did not interrupt or confront her. Instead, they allowed the inconsistencies to exist side by side. According to police records, challenging a subject too early can limit the amount of information they provide, so investigators waited. Silence was used strategically throughout the interview. At several moments, detectives chose not to respond immediately, allowing the quiet to linger. According to interrogation experts, silence creates pressure without confrontation and often encourages a subject to continue speaking, clarifying or adjusting their statements. In this case, silence became one of the most effective tools in the room. Around the midpoint of the interview, Investigators later noted a clear shift in behavior. Her speech slowed, her posture tightened, and her answers became more deliberate. Where earlier responses had been fluid and confident, later ones appeared measured and cautious. Detectives observed that she was no longer simply explaining events, but adjusting them. At this point, the interview entered a different phase. Investigators were no longer focused on gathering new information. They were observing behavior, tone, pacing, and changes in language. As earlier statements were revisited, inconsistencies became harder to reconcile. Certain explanations no longer aligned with previous details, and timelines no longer matched. Investigators did not accuse or argue. They allowed the discrepancies to surface naturally. According to interrogation specialists, once narrative control begins to slip, maintaining consistency becomes increasingly difficult. The subject must remember not only what happened, but what they have already said. The interview did not end with raised voices or a dramatic confrontation. There was no sudden confession. Instead, the story fractured quietly. Earlier, confidence gave way to careful wording. Explanations became shorter. Pauses grew longer, and investigators stopped filling the silence. At this stage, detectives later stated that they no longer needed new information. The inconsistencies spoke for themselves. Following the interview and subsequent investigation, Arias was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During the trial, portions of the interrogation footage were played in court, allowing jurors to observe how statements evolved over time, how small adjustments accumulated, and how consistency gradually eroded. According to court records, the outcome of the case was ultimately decided through evidence presented during the trial, but investigators continue to study this in depth.